Hi, I'm Ryan. So this year, Avid finally gave us the ability to customize our own quick keys in Pro Tools. So undoubtedly, there's going to be 1,000 videos on customizing quick keys this year. My goal is just to show you a efficient way that I came up with assigning keys to the things that I have needed the most and the things that I work through the most. I think this is a highly personal objective for each of you, but I think maybe I can give you some ideas for doing this in the most efficient and easy to remember way possible. So here's my take on the new Quick Key feature in Pro Tools. We thank the creator for our time today. Let's check it out. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is just head right into our customizable quick key window. For keyboard shortcuts, it's under the setup menu. You can see probably a precursor to what I've decided to do by assigning Start K to this window. And so we'll just briefly just talk about the window for a moment if none of you have seen this before. You can search for the Pro Tools feature in the field here and narrow that down to find it, to assign a quick key to it. You can also search by modifiers that are being used in here. So I could say I want to see everything that is using Alt and Control and Shift together. I'm on a Windows machine. And so we could search things that way. We could also search by window, which I was doing a moment ago. So if I come in here, we have all of the windows or menus. Really, these are menu items, menus and submenus that are available to us just by going through the menus here in Pro Tools. So we can find a feature and then just search for it here. If I go to the clip list or the clip menu, this is all the features that are available in the clip menu and submenus in there. So the overall philosophy is this, right? The first thing you want to try to do is you want to simplify everything that you are doing personally as much as possible, but you have to keep something in mind. You don't want to go so far afield that you can't sit down at someone else's Pro Tools system and make sense out of what's happening, right? So there are a lot of quick keys in Pro Tools that make sense, that are fine, and that should stay. But what you're trying to do is simplify your life a little bit. That's also not going to completely throw you off if you're on someone else's system trying to do something, or if you go to a studio and trying to do something. Then it's just going to be a little bit confusing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if there are individual keys that you can use that you're not using, you could start there. I think the keyboard focus keys in large part are fine, honestly. And they make a lot of sense, I think. So I want to use single keys as much as possible to navigate and edit around things in Pro Tools. So having T and R and E for zoom features, having A and S together, D, F, and G together, having B, having all of these things, especially the left half of the keyboard, is just so valuable. I don't want to change any of that stuff. But there are a couple keyboard keys, individual keys, that can go. For example, I really don't like the N key. This insertion follows playback. What that does, if some of you don't know, if I press play and stop, I'm maintaining a selection and a loopable area. If this button is on, this means that the play line stays wherever it stops. And it stays, and it starts, it stays, it starts, it stays, it starts. So you're losing loops anytime you try to make selections and things when that's on. I never, very rarely ever use that. That's me. I know I don't speak for everyone when I'm talking about that. But the key for that, to turn that on or off, is normally N. And N is so easy to use when you press the spacebar to play and stop things that you arbitrarily turn it off and on without even realizing it sometimes. And you just start getting differing behaviors, right? Especially new users, it happens to all the time because you're just a little loose with pressing the spacebar. You tap N and it's automatically off, and then you can't make loops. And it's like drives people crazy. Well, you can see what I've done is taken a single key N and just reassigned it to new track. New track is a 3-key function, right? So that's my third point, is find keys that are using 4 keys or 3 keys and trying to simplify them into 1 or 2. where that makes sense. And so I'm using N for new track, okay? And that's an example there. And also, I'll just point out one more because I've been working with people in Logic. I have a lot of friends that use Logic, and I use Logic a little bit starting now as well. X is a very common key to open the mixer in Logic. And so I'm taking X and using that to toggle edit and mix now instead of Control equals, right? Which are two keys that are really far apart for using the only two windows in Pro Tools. That just seems strange, right? So I think you should find a way to simplify that. Two things that we do a lot is make tracks and use edit and mix windows. And those two keys probably should be some of the easiest keys there are. So those are that's the overall rationale, right? Things that there aren't quick keys for, things that take you two hands to do, things that take 3 or 4 keys that you want to simplify, and things that if you can use a single key for and replace a keyboard focus key where it makes sense, something for you to consider. So here's what I've decided to do, okay? In Pro Tools, I'm going to stay here and explain this to you. In Pro Tools, we have 3 keyboard focus modes. The keyboard focus mode is using your A to Z keys to do a thing. And in the edit window, by default, we're usually using this keyboard focus mode called Command Focus. Command Focus means you're using your individual keys to make edits. A is trim to start, Z is undo, S is trim to end, Z is undo, D is fade to start, right? F is fade, which I don't have a selection, G is fade to end. And so B is separate. And so for the most part, we use a lot of these individual keyboard focus keys, and they should stay pretty much the way that they are, right? But there are other keyboard focus modes, and this is the core of how I've decided to go about this, is that over here to the right, I have clip focus. Over here to the left, I have group focus. So what Avid has done is they have said, if you want to use group focus to turn groups on or off, that means if I press S right now, the strings group is going on and off. We're still going to give you a lifeline to use editing when you're in group focus. And so we're going to give you access to A and S and T and R and all of these things by using on Windows the Start key and on Mac the Control key. But what that ends up being, especially for me, I don't speak for everyone, but I know I speak for the vast majority of you, which is that no one uses those keys. Because for the most part, you are staying in keyboard focus mode, okay? Keyboard focus mode, I mean command focus. You're in command focus mode using your A to Z keys for editing, and especially in the edit window, because if you want to suspend your groups, for example, you can just use the quick key to suspend all groups anyway, and still have individual track control anyway, without turning the group on or off necessarily and needing an individual key to do that. So I did a whole video on how you can utilize all of the grouping features in Pro Tools, how they overlap, and best ways to organize things there. And I'll link that video in here and put that in the info also so you can see that and go into a lot more detail. I'm just talking about keyboard focus and groups and stuff on a surface level. But my point is there's a whole layer of quick keys that we don't use. If you're in command focus doing edits and you're never using clip focus, or even if you're using it momentarily and coming back, right? You're usually not working in group focus, and then you need a layer of quick keys to do all of your extra edits. It takes time to use 2 keys instead of 1 when you're working that way. So there is a layer of quick keys that you have available to you that is on a Mac, Control with all of your letters, and on Windows, the Start key with all of your letters that you should utilize for the vast majority of your quick keys. That's my recommendation personally, okay? So here's what that looks like, and what I'm going to do is just take a look through some menus. I'm not going to demonstrate everything. I'm just going to give you some examples of what I've done, right? Under the File menu, 3 keys normally to do a bounce, and now for me that's Start B on Windows. Under the Edit menu, Consolidate is usually 3 keys, right? It's usually, I have to think about what the original keys are now. Shift Alt 3 on Windows, Shift Option 3 on a Mac. that is the easiest key I have now. And I'll actually demonstrate that for you here. So I'm going to suspend my groups using a quick key. That's a 3 key. And I'm going to go in here and just with one finger right here, start Z. If I'm in the, yeah, there we go. Start Z is right there. For me is one finger on Windows. I actually usually just put my thumb down right there on Start Z to consolidate something. I don't even have to think about it too much or really kind of see where my hand is and try to do the carpal tunnel claw thing to consolidate something, right? So I'm just going to undo that. And but that's an example for, consolidate, and something that we do a lot with 3 keys. The key that I just used is under the groups menu is suspend all groups. So it's showing me that my groups are suspended, but it's not showing me my updated quick key here, which is start S. So I have to say this, I have to pause for Windows users and just say this for a moment. On Windows, the start key with G is by default game mode on a Windows computer. And usually it will default automatically your Windows system into a game mode like an Xbox mode on your computer screen. There is no way that I can find to use Start G on Windows. You can even disable game mode altogether. You can turn that off, and you can turn the key to trigger game mode off, and Windows just prevents you from using Start G at all, really is all that you're doing. So you can either use Start G for game mode on Windows or not at all. And those are the only options. So obviously I would like to have Control G to create a group, Start G, for example. It makes the most sense, right? But in the end, for me, Start S is actually easier. It's just a little bit more to the left hand of the keyboard anyway. And so I'm using Start S for that. But I'll say this for Windows users as well. The other key that you're not going to probably find a workaround for is Start L, because that is a lock screen. And it takes you to a log out screen, and then you have to log back in to do that. I could probably screen capture that right now, but I'm not 100% on that, so I'm not even going to try it. But those 2 keys for Windows users are going to get in the way. You probably can't use them in Pro Tools. But all you Mac users out there will be able to do all that stuff, Control G, Control L, with whatever you want to do on the Mac side, okay? Okay, so under the View menu, other displays here, I have Start T and Start C for the track list and the clip list, for example. I'm using Start N for narrow mix. What is that normally? It's normally Control-Alt-N on, or Control-Alt, is it M or N? M on Windows, and it's normally easier on the Mac. You have Option-Command-M there. It's just simplified it. On Windows, it's horrible, so it definitely simplifies it for me. It's just Start N now to do narrow mix instead. And so that's one that popped out to me there, and then the other displays with those 2 windows helps a lot. So real simply have those 2 windows and those pop-outs right there going on. Okay. Think about a couple of these now. So for the track menu, for new track here, I'm just going with the N key. So I mentioned that a moment ago. That simplifies things a lot, I think. Under the clip menu, here's a couple things for clip grouping that I'm using now. So if I want to create a clip group of these 2 clips here, I'll just go in here. And so what I'm really looking for is just a way to simplify. So again, I can't use Start G or can't use G with any of these things. And so I'm going to use Start U to ungroup, which I don't have anything grouped yet. And so I used Y next to U so that I'm using that to do a clip group and U to ungroup. And the only detail there is just that it is a simpler key that's easier for me to remember than the combinations for those things, because Control and Alt on my laptop especially are separated by 2 keys in between. So Control Alt and G and U is annoying. So having just 2 keys there, Start Y, Start U, makes that a little bit easier. Okay. Okay, so that's under the clip menu for me. Elastic Properties is a big one, man. So if we're doing, if we're warping timing of things. If I'm in here doing vocal warping and trying to work with some things, working with analysis markers. So I'm just going to make a separation here on these clips. And then I'm going to separate here, start E for elastic properties and being able to tune out some of the elastic markers in here, or just pulling that all the way down and then saying, give me one here. Right, greater than 0. Thank you for that. Awesome. And actually just going in here, I actually usually just do this in warp view. You don't even have to do it in elastic view. So I would just jump over to warp view, and that's why I'm used to just double clicking right here to make warp markers. But having a faster key for elastic properties, right, just makes that just a lot easier when you're doing a lot of warp or a lot of quantizing of drum loops, of parts, of things like that. It's just a much quicker key for me to get to. And so I like that one a lot. So that's start E for me there. So a couple new ones going on there. Under the event menu, and this one's big for me as well, I don't actually have any instruments in here right now, but MIDI track offsets is a big one, and to have a quick key assigned for. So that's start M, and now I can see what the offsets are for. I've printed tracks in here now for the orchestra stuff, strings and horns in here. Well, when I have MIDI track offsets up, I have values in here for all of those tracks normally that are instruments. And maybe I need to do an everything about MIDI production in Pro Tools. So maybe that's next. You guys can let me know what you think about that. But MIDI track offsets is a big one for me, especially when I'm in, composition mode, working through things. Having a key for that, but having a key that's that easy also is pretty significant. Okay. I have a couple in here for quick punch is start Q. I think that just makes sense. And so I think the vast majority, I'll show you a couple others that are in here that are kind of more in the background, maybe as well. So I'm actually now also using start F to for all heights. To fit everything, all track heights. So I'm not really explaining that too well. Normally the quick key to fit all track heights vertically within your screen space is trying to get my keys together now in my head. I haven't had to do it for a while. So it's going to be control up and down is to change track height, right? So if I have start up and down to do that, so to do all keys is start and alt and up and down. It's actually all three, isn't it? It's all three modifiers: control, option, control, alt, start, up or down fits all track heights to screen. And on a Mac, it's basically the same thing. All three modifiers up and down to be able to do that. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just doing start F. And start F is my quick key for that. Way easier, right? So the whole point is that I have start F. And then if I have a selection here, I have alt F, which is fit to screen. And if I'm in this kind of position, I can go alt A to fit everything to screen horizontally. So they're all right there, using F and A and start and alt. And that makes more sense for me. So for you on the Mac side, if you are doing all three modifiers and down arrow, it's definitely going to be faster just going control F for that instead. And so that's how we're making that a little simpler to work through. Sorry, it took me a little bit to to explain that better. But those are some of the things I'm doing. Now there's one other thing that I'm doing in here. And that is that I use the MIDI operations a lot, okay? And so I want an easier way. So the MIDI operations are usually Alt-0 to open that window, which is not working for me right now. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go Alt-Q, and that takes me right to quantize. And Alt-D is duration, and Alt-V is velocity, for example. So these features are much faster for me because I assigned all of the event operations keys to Alt and what those keys go for. Alt-T is transpose, okay? Alt-I, input quantize. That's going to make some people happy. You can assign a quick key for that, and nonetheless, one that's just easier to remember. You're using Start I to get that window open. So the MIDI features really came through for me with that, being able to assign all of them to Alt, and makes them all very easy to remember now. And then using Start M for MIDI track offsets. From a MIDI production standpoint, that made things a lot faster for me. And for everything else, I'm starting with Start and using that key to keep everything really consistent for me. So the one that I forgot to point out to you, which I was starting to, is clip gain. So clip gain for me is, I was starting to do that, and then I got sidetracked into something else because all of this is just great, right? So I'm still using Shift Start and the hyphen for, I probably have to figure out a quick key to change showing the clip gain line and clip gain info, these things, because there are quick keys for those. But usually you have them on, you leave them on, right? But this is the big one for me, is instead of doing the Shift Start and up and down thing, or on a Mac, you're using Shift Control up and down to change clip gain. For me, I am using O and L for those, right? So P and semicolon are moving a selection up and down, and O and L is moving clip gain up and down for me. And those were two other keyboard focus keys that I changed there. But I think in a way that keeps it similar for me, and that's all a single key. So clip gain is a big one. I think being able to use the individual keys for those kinds of things. So in those ways, I think probably everyone is not going to do exactly what I'm doing, but I think it gives you a couple ideas. And I'm just going to have this on the screen, and you can pause this at any point to see what my keys are. I'm just going to do that. Okay. One thing to point out here is that with your switching, your edit and mix window, you're actually looking for toggle mix and edit windows. So you have a couple of different quick keys in there to show the mix window or show the edit window. You actually want the toggle feature that's in there to switch those. That's a good little morsel at the end there. All right, have a good time with this. I hope it helps. Go create something. Thank you for watching.